Thanks for tuning in to the EthnoCO podcast, where our motto is helping people, help plants, help people. Please check out the links below and donate to our GoFundMe and Patreon to support the show.
We want to bring you a podcast that is inspiring, exciting, and scholarly, and share a bit of our curiosity about plants, people, anthropology, botany, shamanism, native cultures, environmentalism, and adventures in ethnobotany. Enjoy the show. You are a member of the Matses native group in the Amazon rainforest. You've stopped to rest at a campsite with your brothers and your friends. You're off in a hunting party looking for game. And your brother has started a small fire where he's taking little small sticks and sort of heating them up, getting embers on the ends of them. And to the right of that, there is a frog. And this frog, a really big, just a big green frog, a tree frog, but a very, very large one, looks like it's about to be drawn and quartered. It has its arms and legs stretched out between four posts, and it has little strings tied to its hands and legs. They're doing their best not to hurt the frog, but the frog is obviously not very happy about this. And another one of your friends is scraping a white foamy substance off the back and the legs of the frog. Your brother comes over to you with one of these sticks with a glowing ember on the stick, and he pokes it into your arm about 3 or 4 times. He burns a little hole, 3 or 4 holes on your arm. He takes his fingernail, scrapes off the skin. The other friend comes over and pushes some of this white foamy stuff off of the frog into these holes on your skin. At first, nothing happens, meaning in the first 30 seconds, nothing happens. And then you feel just heat rush into your head. Your head feels like a balloon, like you're floating above your shoulders, and you're overcome with intense nausea. You then begin puking profusely. This lasts for a little while, and you start to feel a little bit better, but you're kind of sleepy, you're kind of groggy, you're a little out of it, and you go down to, you lay down in the camp that you have made with your friends and brothers to take a little rest because you feel rather strange after this incident. And even though you appear to be asleep or unconscious, you can sort of hear your friends talking, and you sort of know what's going on, but you're in a semi-conscious state. And you're starting to feel better from the nausea, the heat is dissipating, and you fall asleep for a little while. But when you wake up, that's when the real magic happens. You feel like you can smell every fruit within 1,000 yards. You can hear every sound, every buzzing insect, and you can see every tiny movement up in the canopy of the trees. You had just ingested something that is called kambo, or it has many, many names, but the scientific name is Phylomedusa bicolor, and it's used by the Matses, which live in the Peruvian-Brazilian border, as a hunting stimulant. They even rub some in the nose of their dog. They didn't burn the dog, but they put some kind of up in his nose. And it's said to help you sort of detoxify, cleanse yourself, but also to help you in the hunt, to see better, to hear better, to smell better, et cetera, et cetera. So this is one of the frog psychoactives that we're going to talk about. Today we are talking about, last episode we talked about animals that use psychoactives or drugs, and this time we are talking about animals that people use as psychoactives or as drugs. So as always with me is Mr. Callum.
G'day. Welcome everybody to this ridiculous episode that Scott and I are going to have a lot of fun recording and sending out to the world. So we are covering ethnozoofarmacognosy, which is the use of animals as medicines for curing, for purging, for hallucinating,
intoxicating.
And for yeah. It's a wild topic, and we've got a lot to cover.
So first off, I have completely lost track of actually which number of episode we're on, so we're just going to ignore that because we sort of skipped around a bit. But this is the first time that I felt, usually I have a pretty good handle on the subject, and I think we do this time, but I feel rather overwhelmed by the obscurity of this subject. Like, this is not something that people talk about a lot, and it's just a huge subject. I mean, our notes are 2 or 3 times longer than any podcast we've done before. But this is the animals that are used as drugs or as psychoactives by humans. So welcome to the podcast. And as Colin said, this is ethnozoo-pharmacognosy. So sort of biological versus botanical substances that are used as psychoactives, bugs as drugs, if you will. And yeah, we'll jump right into it with first off, a lot of people probably, when you think of like an animal that's used as a drug, you think of people licking toads, which is probably not very historically accurate. Like,
it's can't find come about fairly recently in pop culture within the last couple of decades.
Yep. And I would be really curious if anybody knows like exactly where that came from. If there was a movie or something that put that out there in the media or pop culture, I'd be very interested because I can't seem to trace where that came from. But frogs and toads have certainly been used in medicine and used as drugs for many hundreds or thousands of years in various parts of the world.
Yeah, and that goes from through the evolutionary process of these toads and frogs. They've produced things that are mainly toxins, right? Like poison arrow frog in the Amazon, to DMT containing glands on their back, to what Scott was mentioning about Kambo. It's actually, they seem to produce a extremely strong opioid peptide, and our understanding of opioids are they've used in medicine as painkillers, and maybe as opium could be recreationally used throughout history. It's opioid. It's such a strong opioid peptide, like thousands of times too strong for recreational use, seems to have such a intoxicating and cleansing effect on the people in the Matzes.
Yeah, some of the peptides, the opioid peptides found in Phylomedusa bicolor, are said to be 3,000 to 5,000 times stronger than morphine in their pain-killing effect. Now, this was derived from probably doing the rat or the mouse flick, the flicking of its tail, basically how much the poor little mouse or rat kind of writhes around in pain, which is not very nice, but it's the way that they derive information about how powerful painkillers are. And yeah, it's said to be 3,000, 5,000 times stronger than morphine. So
it's said to contain absolutely so potent. I don't know if there is a more potent version of opioids like that. But they're said to contain deltaphin and dermorphin, which are, I guess, potent opioid delta receptor agonists, basically how they interact with the brain. And just to keep that in reference, they're 40 times more potent than endogenous beta endorphin, which is the naturally occurring chemical in our brain. 40 times stronger than what we can naturally do. So I guess the dosage is extremely important. A medicine or a painkiller or a vice, even in some ways, can be turned into a purgative or even a deadly chemical.
And I think that particular compound that we're currently referencing, just to be clear, is not from the Phylomedusa bicolor of the Amazon. They have similar compounds, but as I look at my notes, I believe that particular compound we're referencing is from it is South American toad, but I'm not sure it's Phylomedusa bicolor. I believe it's Phylomedusa Swavage's leaf frog. So just wanted to be clear that
Yep.
that may not necessarily be what the Matses are using, but they use something very, very similar.
It's for the giant leaf frog.
Yep. And there's a number of species of it. They all contain similar related compounds. But that's one, it's interesting. Kambo in recent years, when I first started studying psychoactive plants and psychoactive compounds, it was something that was like really extremely rare to have heard about a white person, a Western person, gringo, whatever, that had used this. But in the last, I would say 10 years, the usage of Kambo has really exploded. And you can readily, like, if you're in the right place, like certain areas in Peru, in the Sacred Valley of Peru near Cusco, you can find people that have Kambo everywhere that'll burn holes in your arm and give it to you. But it used to be a very, very rare thing. There is a little bit of worry that the frog itself is being not treated well, and I think that's a legitimate worry. We should maybe be farming them or propagating them, releasing them, whatever. The Matses, when they use them, they say that even though they tie it like up on sticks, they say you do need to be nice to it, and they don't kill it. So they piss it off. It's angry because it releases its venom. But afterwards, they let it go and they gently place it on a tree. And that's something we should keep in mind as we're using these medicines to treat the animal well. Yeah,
absolutely. And Scott was referring to the influx of tourists and foreigners that are journeying to these countries to partake in the ceremonies. And I've spoken to a lot of people who are very interested in or have used it for the treatment of certain cancers or debilitations or disorders that they might have. So like chronic fatigue syndrome and certain cancers. So they believe that there might be a supercharging of the immune system and the body that results from the use of such a harsh ceremony, such a intoxicating and purgative experience.
So yeah, we wanted to start with the frogs and toads because that's what most people may be familiar with. Other people may have heard of something called Spanish fly, and we're going to come back around to toads in a little bit, but just to briefly touch on Spanish fly. So Spanish fly for a long time was reputed to be sort of this aphrodisiac, so I did some research on it. Never tried it myself just because the way it. Anyway, I'll tell you what I found and why I didn't try it.
Do you take it? Is it how much of the insect do you need to consume, or how do you take it?
I think you take it internally, like as a powder. So the beetles that it comes from are also known as blister beetles. And I think like if you crush one and rub it on your hand, it can actually like peel your skin off.
Ugh.
So that's one reason. People have used them to remove not only warts, but tattoos. Before there was laser tattoo removal, people apparently would crush these up and it'd peel your skin off and take a tattoo off you.
Ugh.
So it's pretty potent, but in small amounts for quite a long time, at least hundreds of years, I would say. People have taken small powdered amounts of this beetle, the Spanish fly, or the blister beetle, internally. And apparently what is happening, it can give men an erection. But it's not quite like an erection. It's, from what I read, it's more like a swelling of your genitals because it's really irritating the line of your urethra and causing your genitals to swell. So just doesn't sound like a great aphrodisiac to me, but
someone's paying for it.
Yeah. And in higher doses, it can cause like some serious like internal bleeding, nausea, diarrhea, and even death. I think that I read about one guy that died from taking too much. So I don't know, maybe I should try it one day.
If the mood strikes.
Right, that's right.
That's right.
Yeah, it sounds pretty intense. and it's sort of fallen more into obscurity. Like 100 years ago, if I brought up Spanish fly, a lot more people would have known what it was than they do today, because it's just seemed to they've kind of figured out that it's just not worth it. Another reputed animal-based psychoactive is the mezcal, or the tequila worm, which I believe is a worm that lives on the agave plants, which is what they make mezcal and distill tequila from. And it's reputed to be psychoactive. That if you're drinking and you drink the worm, or you eat the worm at the bottom of the bottle. And I'm not sure why they exactly put them in the bottle. Maybe it sort of gives it a mystique or a mythos, but apparently there's not much to that. Doesn't really do much. So I just wanted to touch on those two things that people may have heard of, that don't really work. Now we're gonna get to some stuff that really, really does work. So what's next?
On the toads and frogs topics, how about we jump into Bufo ovarius?
Sure. What's the current correct name, Callum? It's they've changed the genus.
Rhinella.
Yeah.
So yeah. Is that for alvarius as well? Rhinella alvarius has been changed as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can find literature in Bufo alvarius or Rhinella alvarius, and that includes a number of other toads, closely related toads.
Yep.
And that's this one in particular is the Colorado river toad, or the Sonoran desert toad, which have glands on its back that secrete 5-MeO-DMT.
Yep.
So
yeah. Big glands kind of on the back of its head, the back of its neck, these huge like glands that are filled with this pussy liquid.
Milky, go ahead, milky venom sap stuff.
Yeah.
That and apparently, people will catch the frog or toad and agitate it a little bit and extract some of this milky chemical, dry it on a dish, and then smoke it, typically. And that is a powerful, very, very powerful DMT experience. Lasts for 15 odd minutes for a lot of people in various areas of the world where this is available. And I'll give you an anecdotal story from Mike Tyson himself.
Excellent.
He said it knocked him off his feet. He said, I came across this thing they called the toad. I smoked this medicine, drug, whatever you want to call it, and I've never been the same. I look at life differently. I look at people differently. It's almost like dying and being reborn. It's inconceivable. I tried to explain it to my wife. I don't have words to explain it. It's almost like you're dying, you're submissive, you're humble, vulnerable, but you're invincible.
So much like the DMT experience. So the Colorado river toad. So in most of the literature, if you're going to Google this, I recommend you Google Bufo alvarius. They have changed the genus, but in most of the literature, the old literature, this stuff you're going to find readily available. We wouldn't have this podcast without this book. Thank you, Mr. Snoo Volgelbrunner. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name. People will like squeeze these glands of this frog onto pieces of glass, and it's the Colorado river toad, Sonoran desert toad, so it's like western U.S. down into Mexico, and it contains like 5-MeO-DMT, bufotenin, DMT, and other related compounds. And as Callum described, it creates a very similar experience to smoking DMT, which a lot of people may be familiar with, especially if they listen to Joe Rogan or Terrence McKenna or whoever. So an interesting thing from a ethnobotanical or a ethno-zoo pharmacognosy perspective is that we cannot trace this practice. We, meaning the community that's interested in psychoactives, we cannot trace this practice back before the 1960s or maybe 50s. And it's so strange. This is such a profound mystery to me. And once again, if anybody has any information, like if you have some good solid information as to why or who figured this out, apparently there's this pamphlet that went around in the 1960s documenting this practice. If this was the discovery of one guy or a couple of friends, like that's a really, really amazing thing. But anyway, it doesn't seem to be a cultural practice done by any native groups. At least there's no evidence for that I've ever seen. And I would be a little wary of people, not of the people, but of their information if they claim it's an ancient Native American practice or whatever. There's just no real evidence for that. But anyway, you squeeze the glands of this frog, you put it on glass, you dry it in the sun, you scrape it up, you put it in like a DMT pipe and you smoke it, and it's apparently a really, really amazing experience. We'll have our good friend Scott Montgomery on here one day, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Scott took a hit of this stuff and he just took off running.
That's right.
Yeah, is that right? That's what he told us, right?
I don't want to misexplain the story, but he did explain it to me, and he said he sat down in a field and people supported him in this. This was in Peru, where it's totally legal to do. And our good friend smoked this substance and fell into a semi-stupor, as you may do, and then all of a sudden just started going, "Whoa, whoa," and almost like erupting in euphoric bliss and energy, and just ran off into the field, and then had this extremely ecstatic and cathartic experience, running, dancing, moving.
Yeah.
And within 10-15 minutes, just relaxed and calmed down and laid back down. And he woke up and thought, "Oh, it's over. Did it work?" And his friends were like, "Did it work? Oh, you were like running around yelling, like."
Yeah.
And he said he didn't actually have memory of the experience, but the memories came back in his dreams.
So point being, it's a very powerful compound, and Scott was with good friends that did take care of him, and so he took off running, but someone was following him, so he was okay. But that's the Sonoran desert toad and the Colorado River toad.
Yeah.
There have been, in the Garden of Eden, our big bad tome of ethnobotany. Apparently there have been some people in the United States. It's illegal, so we encourage academic research. Not that you do anything illegal, but if you're in a place like Peru or I don't know the laws of Mexico, but wherever where it's legal, go for it, but don't do anything illegal. But in this book, they say even some pet shops that used to have them have restricted their sale. But even more concerning than that is that there have been over harvesting of the toads. So, I'm all for people expanding their consciousness, people learning about these things through direct experience. As long as it's legal, I think that's great. But what we don't want to do is harm any animal or plant species. So I think that should be at the foremost of our thoughts when we do these things. So if that's something that interests you, seek it out in the proper way, or like propagate the toads. Be the Johnny Appleseed of toads and spread the toads. Then you can do what you want and not feel guilty about it. But
it's good to mention it, because it will be a common theme in this explanation, this episode, that there are definitely, when you're taking entheogens and psychoactives from animals, there's always going to be that a bit of a concern for animal cruelty and animal welfare. So this is going to be reoccurring through this episode, and we don't encourage the cruel use of these animals for this.
Absolutely.
We're really communicating the science that we are researching and the anecdotal stories that we are experiencing through others, and passing on that information, because it clearly has a very important part in human history.
Yeah. And if you watch our hunting and conservation episode, you'll see that we always promote, I would say we always promote the species, the integrity of the species, over the hunter, or in this case, the user. We always promote the welfare of the animals over the human being. In general. I can't think of any exceptions to that. But
I got a question very linked to the toads that we've been talking about. I don't know much about, and in Australia, we have a huge problem with the cane toad, which is Rhinella marina, was previously Bufo marina.
Mm-hmm.
And Scott knows a little bit about its more ancient origins in Mesoamerica, Central America. Do you want to explain a little bit about what the old people, the ancient people, were doing with this toad that has become such an invasive animal through northern Australia?
Sure. So I'll read it again. I don't want to ever not give credit to this book, Garden of Eden by Snoo Vogelbrander. So I'll just read some excerpts. In Mesoamerican mythology, the toad is symbolic of the Earth Mother, the fertile giver and the taker of life. Toad remnants, usually Bufo marinus, the toad Callum just referred to, as well as carved artifacts such as statues, axe heads, and bowls with toad representations have been found in Maya and Olmec burial sites dating back to 1250 to 900 BC. So obviously this toad was very important, and there's some evidence that it may have actually been eaten as a famine food. So if people were running out of food, they could sort of boil it, prepare it, skin it in a certain way. There's these areas that these areas of occupation that show all these toad skeletons. And there's some argument, like, was this a ritual site or was it something that they were using as a famine food? And we don't have good evidence. Like, I can't tell you either way what they were doing, but we can take this excerpt. In southern Veracruz, Mexico, Bufo marinus has been used as an unusual psychotrope for love magic or divination by shamans in the past. The venom from 10 toads was collected without harming them and mixed into a thick paste with plant ashes. 5 grains of sprouted corn and lime water. This was boiled until its foul smell had passed. This liquid was then fermented in the sun for several days. It was then dried with heat and rolled into a dough, which would be reconstituted in water and drunk when required. A rather lengthy process. Perhaps this lengthy process was sort of detoxifying. Maybe, like, if you just ate it, you would just die or get sick. This lengthy process, to me, kind of alludes to the fact that you couldn't just use it, like, you can't just lick the toad. Like, that's maybe not a thing. So what happens when you drink this stuff after going through this week-long process? One researcher who ingested this preparation noted sweating and hypertension within 30 minutes, followed by a chilling sensation, muscle twitching, headache, immobility, and delirium lasting 3 to 5 hours. And that's Davis, 1988, and First, 1976. If you ever want references, like if you ever hear me say something and you're like, that sounds like a load of crap, send us a message and I'll tell you where I got it from. Doesn't sound like a particularly nice time to be.
After all of that work.
After all that work, yeah.
You're still tremoring, vomiting, and in delirium.
Delirium, yeah. It only lasts.
It's like, that the lengthy process speaks to suggests that maybe it requires that absolutely to not die and to have a psychoactive experience. But maybe maybe for those people it was extremely important. It was an important enough experience or ceremonial process to go through that it was worth all of that labor. We don't know. We need to research more on that very ancient practice. It's a long time ago. And we've
absolutely. And there's some, it says likewise, European witches have repeatedly added Bufo species to some of their intoxicating magical brews. In rural England, a decoction or a casserole, which sounds very nice, of a toad and certain mushrooms picked in full moonlight and not touched with bare hands in spring water was said to be drunk in 5 drops as an aphrodisiac and love potion. So the whole toad frog magic thing runs very, very deep. We're going to do a whole podcasts on European baneful botanicals, toads, witching herbs, psychoactives, but that's a story for another time.
Do you have anything to add to the adventure and history and cultural use of toads and frogs? We've covered Kambo, the Sonoran desert toad, the cane toad.
Just these are not even in my notes, but off the top of my head, there's a number of frogs where they've derived other pain-killing morphine-like compounds that are, some are hundreds or thousands of times more potent than morphine. And just quickly, as we touch on that, there have been anti-cancer, anti-HIV drugs derived from scorpion, snake venom, all sorts of stuff along those lines. Snail venom, we may touch on that earlier. Actually, let me tell that story real quick right now. There's one anecdote, snail venom, a little disconnected from frogs, but a marine snail, I believe it's a marine snail. There's a new drug that came out, and this is a potent opioid type drug. And I don't fully understand exactly what happened. Anybody that wants the research paper, I can send to you. But I believe they had a, what's it called when you have a little device under your skin that slowly releases a drug? Anyway.
Is it for contraception?
What's that?
For contraception?
No, or for very simple. The same sort of, the same concept, but this is a painkiller. So it's somebody that had some serious pain issues, and they had one of these devices put under their skin. I'm not exactly sure where it was, but they had a psychotic break. Like they were going nuts. And they went to the hospital. And I think the doctors at the hospital were smart enough to realize, what was going on. They prescribed some sort of calming drug. I think it was Risperdal or something, diazepam, something like that, to calm them down. And as soon as they said they were having hallucinations, excitation, all these intense psychoactive effects. And as soon as they were able to cut this thing off, they actually sucked out the medicine and they replaced it with saline solution. All the effects immediately stopped. So in certain people, it seems to have really helped them with pain. And with other people, or this particular person, there's only one case I've ever read of this. And I really need to give you the name of the snail. I'm sorry about that. And I can. But as soon as they remove the drug, the compound from this, the person was 100% okay and back to normal. So yeah, anybody who wants the name, I can find it as I look through my notes. I don't want to take too much time with it. But yeah, Callum, what's next?
Next is reindeer. Uses of reindeer. And there's a couple of uses in the deer family, but I guess the first more medicinal use, not too crazy, but pretty widely used in the West to this day, which is deer velvet from the antlers, which is harvested from farmed or wild deer. It's basically this slightly hairy skin surface that grows across I think it's called the coronet, which is the starting of the antler, and then it grows up the antler as the antler's growing. It's basically, it helps in the formation of the antler. So it's rich in blood vessels and nutrients. And basically when the deer matures or the antler matures, that will just fall off. They'll just shed it off every year. They'll consciously rub it off on trees. And farmers have, they cut the antler off, they'll extract the deer velvet, dry it, process it into powders quite often, and sell it legally on the market. And that contains some really interesting compounds, I guess. It contains amino acids and peptides, nucleotides, and multiple enzymes. So it's a really useful thing for increasing strength, reducing fatigue, said to have anti-tumor, anti-cancer effects, and stimulate skin and hair cells. So it's to have stem cell like cells within this tissue. So people are using it for all kinds of things.
So The references that I remember from it, I haven't studied this as well as Callum has, but it almost sounded as kind of like almost a steroid that like bodybuilders could take, or that, I don't know, it became popular, I feel like about 10 years ago. Like these various substances, plant and animal substances, will peak in popularity, and then they'll have their limelight for a minute and then they'll go down. But yeah, I remember like bodybuilders and weightlifters and stuff using antler velvet as a addition to their diet, to their protein shake or whatever. Sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. On one part, there could be other molecules and compounds within it that could be more steroidal in structure. But at the same time, maybe it was just used at that time to aid gym goers and athletes in just getting every single nutrient into their bodies that can help them with the process that they're on already. Maybe they're marketed as some bulk building steroid. Right. But at the same time, when you think about it, growing of antlers takes a lot of growth hormones.
Yep.
And I think that's the side of it used for skin and hair regeneration in humans.
Cool.
It no doubt has some really, really beneficial nutrients and molecules in it.
Yeah. So on the one hand, as Callum mentioned, we do have to be careful of these fantastical claims that companies that want to take our money make. But on the other hand, my opinion, these things are magic. So I think both of those things can be true at the same time. People drink reindeer piss, Callum. In Siberia.
It's true. Yeah. We as humans have drunk reindeer piss for a long, long time. So if you were born in Siberia and you maybe lived nearby a shaman, you might be offered once in a while a cup of reindeer piss.
That's right.
And that is an interesting story on why would people do that? Scott, tell us all.
So this again could be another whole entire podcast. And as this podcast go on, me and Callum will call in other experts. We'll always have me and Callum, but like we have a cursory knowledge of a bit of all this stuff, enough to be super interested in it. But yeah, this is a whole episode. Amanita muscaria, an amazing, amazing mushroom. So when the reindeer seek out, and this is from our previous episode, associated with Christmas. It's kind of controversial. There have been some very intelligent scholars that have debunked this whole Santa Claus reindeer Amanita thing, but it is a fact that reindeer eat the Amanita muscaria mushroom. And when they eat the Amanita muscaria mushroom, they take in the compounds from the mushroom, obviously, and they filter them through their liver and kidneys, and they piss them out. And the people who are in close contact with these reindeers living in Siberia or caribou, I think in Alaska, these people are milking the reindeer sometimes. So it's not like how the fuck you get, excuse me. So I got too into it. Okay, back up. Okay. So it's not too uncommon to think that these people who are milking. Okay. That's why I love doing this, man. It's fun. Okay. All right. I guess we could cuss.
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay. Okay, but we'll start over. All right. So these reindeer are taking the Amanita muscaria into their bodies, and they are processing it through their liver and kidneys. And the people who are in contact with these reindeer or these caribou are reindeer herders, and so they're in contact with them all the time. They're milking them. They're taking milk and meat and various products from the reindeer. So it's not that crazy to think that they would see the reindeer peeing. And these these Siberian people associate the Amanita muscaria with intoxication. They could perhaps tell that their reindeer are intoxicated. And somebody at some point thought it was a good idea to drink some of this reindeer pee. And when they did, they became intoxicated themselves from the urine of the reindeer. It's well known among the Amanita muscaria using ethnic groups that the urine of someone that has ingested the Amanita muscaria will then urinate, pee out, an intoxicating urine. And if you drink that, be it human or reindeer, you will then become intoxicated. So not necessarily that the reindeer itself is psychoactive, but through the use of Amanita muscaria, which the reindeer seek out, the urine of the reindeer becomes psychoactive. And I want to say, with such okay, so you're listening to this podcast, this is crazy, right? With such outlandish ways of reaching these ecstatic, intoxicated, inebriated states, whatever you want to call it. We need to really consider what it would be like to be one of these people in their culture, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 10,000 years ago, or an extremely isolated community. And we need to understand that their culture is very different than ours, and that these ecstatic, inebriated states were very important to them. And that says something about their culture, that we can really, I find these, the use of psychoactives to be a window into people's cultures that we can use to understand their culture, because it's something strange and different from our culture in general. I mean, we drink like beer and smoke pot or whatever, but it's such a unique way of doing things and seeing things, and they give it pretty high precedence that we should take heed and look into it and try to understand what's going on. And yeah.
And to do that, one of the challenges as an anthropologist, ethnobiologist, and explorer in general, or any of us out there to learn these kinds of things, is we need to practice suspending our disbelief just long enough to just get ourselves outside of our own cultural programming, you could say, to see that there are thousands of cultures around the world that do things differently to us. And with that comes a bit of humor, because it is ridiculous to us.
Sure.
But to delve onto the other side, to be like, what's going on here, and what has gone on here for thousands of years? What would it be like to live in that area?
Yep.
And to not have TV and not have technology that we have, and literally live off the reindeer. They pull their sleighs around in winter. They use their skins, their antlers, their meat, their milk, their urine. So shout out to the ancient hero who was the first person to either just grab a cup of reindeer piss and drink it down, or maybe even bolder, was drinking the piss of the shaman who drank the piss of the reindeer.
Yeah.
And then discovered and told everyone that, we're actually tripping balls, or I'm actually meeting God by doing this.
Yep. So yeah, one day we'll do a whole episode on, I feel like almost every subject that we talk about leads into an entire 2-hour podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, we need to consider
for anyone who just wants to know a little bit about that mushroom, it contains muscimol and ibotenic acid. Is that correct?
Yep.
And part of the reasons maybe why they drink the urine is the kidneys of the animal or the human are said to filter out, or the liver and the kidneys are said to filter out some of the more harsh chemicals that give us, I guess, a more intoxicating, nauseating effect on our body, and leaving some of the more psychoactive components to it for us to drink. So it could be part of why they do it.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think we'll revisit this subject one day. So yeah, we need to think about, if you sat around with, 250 of your closest friends in a jungle for 20,000 years, the things you would come up with, with no TV, no internet, and it's amazing. Anyway, I think we're going to take a break.
Yeah.
And get back to you guys.
We'll be right back.
All right, guys, we are back after a brief intermission. And sorry for my foul language earlier. We might keep that in because it was kind of funny. I will bleep it out. Not that this is necessarily a show for kids, but I do want to sound scholarly and not foul. But we're now going into the Tritata toxin. We're now going into the sea, into marine life. And there are all sorts of marine life that are psychoactive. So we're going to start doing featured books on the podcast because me and Callum are students of this stuff. We haven't, we're, as most people are, we're learning from all the stuff behind us. You can see we both sit behind big bookshelves, and neither one of us planned it like that. It just worked out like that. But today, the two featured books are The Serpent and the Rainbow by Wade Davis. Got a glare on the screen there, but it's The Serpent and the Rainbow. There we go. By Wade Davis. And he has another book on the same subjects. Wade Davis, The Passage of Darkness. We're going to talk about those in just a second. But first, we're going to talk about, or in addition to, we're going to talk about Tritata toxin. Tritata toxin is a compound that's found in various species of pufferfish. A number of fish species contain Tritata toxin. And with that in mind, I will quote Pericles, who says the dose makes the poison. He was an ancient Greek, I believe, doctor, medicine worker, Pericles. The dose makes the poison. So in Japan, before we talk about deliberate psychoactive or poisonous use of these pufferfish of Tritata toxin, we're going to talk about people in Japan who semi-use it deliberately. So many people, another common psychoactive animal that people may have heard of is fugu. And fugu is, as we stated previously, a pufferfish that can be turned into sashimi. It can be eaten in a number of ways. It's often caught, I believe, off the west coast of Japan. It's even been banned in various parts of Japan. Like, apparently the emperor is not allowed to eat this because of what can happen to you when you do eat it. So I'll read a little story. It's called a rakugo, I believe, or a humorous short story. This is just from the Wikipedia on fugu, but it tells of three men who prepared a fugu stew, but were unsure if it was safe to eat. So to test the stew, they gave some to a beggar. Like, here, homeless guy, eat this. When it did not seem, they came back later, it didn't seem to have any effect on him. So they ate the stew. Later, they met the beggar again. And when they were happy to see that he was fine and in good health, they ate their stew. And I messed up. Sorry, man. Let me start that over. So we're going to share a rakugo, or a humorous short story. And it tells the story of three men who prepared a fugu stew, but were unsure whether it was safe to eat. So to test the stew, they gave some to a beggar. When it did not seem to do him any harm, they ate the stew. Later, they met the beggar again and were delighted to see that he was still in good health. After that encounter, the beggar, who had hidden the stew instead of eating it, knew that it was safe and that he could eat it. So the three men had been fooled by the wise beggar. The beggar actually sort of used them as a test because he was aware that fugu was in the stew. So fugu can be very dangerous. And in Japan, if you die or you appear to be dead after eating fugu, they actually leave you by the graveside for a number of days. And yeah, fugu contains Tritata toxin, particularly in like the ovaries, the brain, the liver, and certain parts of the fish. The meat is generally considered safe. And Japanese sushi, sashimi chefs go through a special process. They train as an apprentice under a master chef to learn how to prepare this stuff. You actually have to get a license. As I said, it's banned in certain parts of Japan. But there are certain people who, probably most people are interested in this because it has that like air of danger, and you can actually get like numb lips or numb extremities after ingesting it. And it's said that the best chefs will leave a tiny amount of the toxin in the fish so that you get those tingling and subtle effects, but you don't die or get to a point where you're extremely sick. So tetrodotoxin causes sort of a poisoning where you're paralyzed, but you're fully aware. So it's a very scary thing. And it basically just slowly stops your lungs from being able to breathe. So you may be laying there, you're aware that you're alive, you're not unconscious, but you can't call out for help. And it slowly paralyzes your lungs till you reach the point where you can't breathe anymore and you die. But some people recover. Or if you put them on artificial ventilation, they can recover. So that's what they would probably do for you now. But so the liver is particularly known for causing poisoning. But, and this is another excerpt from just the wiki, but in November 2011, a chef in a 2 Michelin star restaurant known as Fukiji in Tokyo was suspended from his post. The chef served fugu liver to a customer who, despite being warned of the risk, specifically asked that it was served to him. Why was he doing this? I don't know. I mean, I'd like to try it if I didn't die, but he was required to be hospitalized, but only from mild symptoms of tetrodotoxin paralysis, and he made a full recovery. 5 men were poisoned in a restaurant in a part of Japan in March 2015 after specifically asking for the liver. So it's quite a dangerous thing. And these fish seem to seasonally vary in the amount of toxin they have. And sometimes it's okay to eat, sometimes it's not. But yeah, fugu can be rather dangerous. It contains tetrodotoxin.
It's got to be tied in with our fascination for a exciting and confronting culinary experience similar to that of consuming really high amounts of chili. Right. You know, the first people to consume these things and experience the tingling or the numbing of the lips and the extremities are just as when you eat high amounts of chili for the first time, maybe it's painful, strange, not exactly a pleasurable experience. But us humans, we love a little bit of intoxication with our day-to-day consumption of food, don't we?
Yep, absolutely. But what's the perhaps the more interesting side of the tetrodotoxin story, Cal?
So we're going to jump across the planet from Japan. We're going to land in Haiti, the island of Haiti, which was explored and documented by Wade Davis, the author of those books there. And Mr. Davis documented the rumors that Haitian zombies were real and needed to be ethnobotanically researched and to actually understand what was going on. What was this cultural practice? Was it true? Was it false? And what he found were the Bokors, or the shamans of West Africa, which is typically from the voodoo tradition, or They were voodoo priests called Bokors. They utilize the tetrodotoxin from pufferfish from the ocean around Haiti, and they create a thing called, in French, I don't speak French, but it's called coupe de poudre, which is called powder strike, and it's also named zombie powder. Powder strike typically because they can blow it onto their victim, or shoot it in a dart, or inject it into you as well. And basically, it's a combination of mystical herbs. And what Wade Davis discovered was it was a combination. Different Bokors did it in different ways, but it was a combination of burnt and ground up human remains, usually bones, a small tree frog, a polychaete worm, which is a marine worm, a large New World toad, and one or more species of puffer fish containing the tetrodotoxin. And as we were discussing, that tetrodotoxin's effects in small amounts cause tingling of extremities, sensation of floating, euphoria, for those who consume it carefully in Japan. Maybe that's part of the pleasure of it. In high levels, it will kill you in minutes due to respiratory failure.
Yeah.
In sublethal doses, which is what the Bacoras are using it for, the victim can be left in a state of suspended animation, breathing in slowed and barely perceptible, heart rate near zero, but the person remains conscious and aware. So they'll basically choose their victims, blow this powder or inject it into you, and when you're, clinically proclaimed as dead and about to be buried, the victim is buried and assumed dead, left next to the grave, or is actually buried in the earth. Then the Bacora will come back and re-exhume the body of the person, pull them out of the grave, and due to the lack of oxygen in the brain and the addition of another herb, which is Datura stramonium, or Jimson weed, which is another powerful psychoactive plant that the Bacora administers, the victim is maintained in a state of delirium and incapable of normal functioning. So this combination creates a state of extreme psychological passivity, and therefore that's the recipe for creating zombified people that will follow you and take orders from you and fulfill your every will. Very scary psychoactive dark medicinal use for that. And there was one account of a gentleman called Clevius Narcisse, who was born in 1922 in Haiti. And in 1962, he was admitted to Schweitzer Hospital, which was an American hospital on the island, with symptoms of severe fever, fatigue, and coughing up blood. He was then pronounced dead and held in cold storage for a day and then buried. 20 years later, in 1980, he reappeared in L'Estéré, which is a town or a city, to his family and townspeople, telling them his childhood nickname and sharing intimate family information just to confirm he was who he said he was. It turns out he had been paralyzed by a voodoo priest to make him appear dead, was conscious but immobile when he was buried. Then the Bacor exhumed him from the grave, drugged him with datura, and enslaved him to work on his sugar plantation. He alleged that he was forced to consume a paste which rendered him unable to think for himself and caused memory loss, alongside other workers who were also drugged. And when the voodoo priest finally died and the medicating ceased, Clevius escaped, returning home to his family. And so he went on to live, I think, 80 years. Yeah. And his story has been documented as kind of an anecdotal confirmation that this zombie powder is real and is used. And we know with more ethnobotanical studies of the plants used as well, things like scopolamine that are within Jimson weed and other plants, can induce a state of delirium. There's even a modern version of zombie powder that's used in Colombia called burundanga, which means devil's breath. And people in Colombia some criminals in Colombia will go up to you with maybe a map or a book, and the powder will be on the papers, and I'll go up to you and say, "Oh, can you show me where the mall is or whatever in this on this map here?" And I'll go up to you, and then I'll blow that into your face.
Yep.
And then they'll back away. They might walk off and circle around and come back to you. And by that time, the scopolamine's taken effect, and you are already starting to become induced into that extreme passivity, which leaves you unable to think for yourself and make decisions for yourself. So you just follow what everyone says. And there's been accounts of people waking up in empty hotel rooms and going downstairs and saying, "What the hell happened? I think I've been robbed." And the receptionist say, "No, you emptied your room last night. You did it." and there was someone with you, but you basically said this is fine. And there's accounts of people basically extracting money, giving away property, and more insidiously, even after all of that, you have no memory that it's happened. Terrifying stuff.
So the 2 pages I was showing in the book, The Passage of Darkness, one of them was actually, say his name for me, Callum.
Clovis Narcisse.
Yeah. One was his death certificate, and the other picture was him. Let's see if I can pull it up again. That's him standing beside his grave.
Yeah.
That's where he's buried. But one is an official hospital document that this man had died. And so, yeah, when this, now there's more to it than this, and we need to do an entire podcast. Give us a like, and maybe we can get Wade Davis on this podcast, which is like a dream of mine. If we have Wade Davis and Glenn Shepard on here, I can die happy. Like, that's it for me. I'm good. But if we could get Wade Davis on here, because it's sort of it may or may not work outside the bounds of Haitian spiritual society. There are cases where somebody can be zombified simply by them getting the evil eye, or a cross being put in front of their door made of this zombie powder. But I think it's probably, I'd love to ask Wade Davis this, but I think it's probably somewhere in between those two things. It's not necessarily an entirely spiritual affliction, and it may not necessarily be an entirely chemical, pharmacologically induced affliction. So we'd love to ask Wade Davis about that. And that's a story for another time, because we could talk about that for 2 hours. But this is probably one of the most interesting ethnobotanical, zoo pharmacognosy stories that exist in the world. It's probably one of the strangest and most interesting stories I've ever heard. So if you have a chance to read these books, please do. But we won't dwell on that too long, because it's such a vast subject that we need to do an entire podcast on. We will continue along the line of marine species, and I'll mention a couple anecdotes or a couple little facts quickly. There's sea cucumbers. There's even been a sea cucumber that contains THC or compounds related to THC, which is what is the active principle in cannabis, in marijuana. That's an interesting and diverse subject. But one that's really well documented is the dreamfish. Yep. So if you, maybe anybody interested watching our podcast has heard of Hamilton and Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia. He has a great, I actually thought I like Hamilton. I like everything he does. But I thought this was one of the best episodes he ever had, because he went from the literature to sort of people being unintentionally poisoned by these dreamfish, nightmare fish, which are found all over the world. Like, there's ones in Hawaii, there's ones in the Mediterranean, there's ones in areas, in the Middle East, in ancient Greece, the ancient Romans. And Hamilton went.
Arabic, it's the fish that makes dreams, and in Hawaii, it's the chief of ghosts is the translation.
Yes.
Reunion Island is the fish that inebriates.
Yes.
The number of different names and different scientific species, taxonomy of these things documented to cause the psychoactive effect.
That's right. Many different species, and as I look through my book here, says the existence of dreamfish phenomenon was first revealed to the Western public through an article in National Geographic sometime around 1960.
Yep.
And a local gentleman, I'm not sure where he's from, says the small ones don't affect me, but once I had a big one for supper, I spent that night on an operating table with the surgeon doing one operation after another. He's dreaming. Always cutting through a new and expensive suit I had just purchased. But It was known, as we said, to the ancient Romans, to the ancient Arabs. And you wouldn't believe
Joe Roberts from National Geographic in 1960.
Yep.
This could have been the same experimentation that he was conducting there. He also said he experienced intense hallucinations with a science fiction theme that included futuristic vehicles, space exploration, and monuments marking first trips to space. That's very interesting because that was in 1960. Very early space exploration was occurring with the United States when in 1961, I think.
Yep. But this, I mean, it really occurs from all over the world, and you'd be amazed at how many various species there are. I mean, there's like almost 2 pages. I'll show you in Gardeners of Eden if we can see it. Maybe that's the genera name there. A really vast number of species that cause these dreams, nightmares, but also not just dreams, but intoxication, inebriation in the waking state. Because dreams can be very subjective. I had a strong dream, but they can also cause inebriation in the waking state. Also things like dizziness, delirium, vomiting. But one thing I really enjoyed about Hamilton's episode, I really feel that Hamilton, in this case, he does great work touching on many various subjects. But in this case, I feel like he found something new because I didn't find anything in this book, and this is the best dang book you can get about psychoactives ever, in my opinion. He noted that people in Madagascar purposely seek out this fish and eat it like recreationally, and I just thought that was amazing. I'll let Callum talk for Callum. How do you pronounce the name of this particular phenomenon? It's difficult.
The consumption or accidental intoxication by fish is ichthyoaliotoxism.
Yep.
So whether that's accidental, recreational, or ceremonial consumption of fish that are also psychoactive.
Yep.
And some of the accounts are, from Madagascar to Réunion to even Mediterranean Sea. Some of the fish species are quite often commonly documented as Sarpa salpa, which is what was called Salema porgi, and that's been documented by the ancient Romans and people in Mediterranean today. Maloidichthes flavolineatus. There's another one, and I think that one was in Hawaii. That's the chief of ghosts, which is used ceremonially in Polynesia.
Mm-hmm.
Quite fascinating that they knew what they were doing with those fish.
And I read an account that said there was a presence known on a certain island, and the fish caught close to that island were said to have more powerful properties, nightmare, dream-inducing properties than other fish from outside of that area of the same species. So one interesting thing about this is scientists think it's probably that the fish is consuming some sort of algae that's building up in its system. And that may be a deterrent to predators, or it may just be accidental. But some of these fish in certain times of the year are just fine to eat, but you can't eat them in like June, July, August. So it's a quite a complex, multi-species phenomenon that is really interesting and has a lot of facets to it.
Exactly. So we still don't know whether it's a hallucinogen, a toxin, or some kind of combination. But one of the lead scientific studies is it could be linked to the algae that grow on phytoplankton that grow on seagrasses and things like that, even on corals.
Yep.
And that fluctuates seasonally and around the world, and then different species of fish consume different marine plants. So it's really quite hard to study. And of course, each of those fish are consuming lots of different things.
Yep.
So it's really hard to pin down what is causing it. But it is said it potentially could contain alkaloids of the indole group which occur naturally in algae and phytoplankton and are chemically similar to LSD.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's always the study of the potential that it could be linked to dimethyltryptamine, DMT.
Yep, I saw that as well. And maybe potentially beta carbolines is also in the fish, making, as our good friend Snoo refers to it, fish ayahuasca.
Fish ayahuasca.
He literally says that. I want to pull it up, but
yep.
So yeah, that's and we could do a whole story on that. But I think for now unless Callum has something to add, we'll move on to the next.
Well, it's said to be one of the best studied ones is the Selma porgy, or now it's called Sarpa salpa.
Yep.
Or sea bream, and that's actually found in the Mediterranean Sea. So the ancient Romans were using it as an old recreational food drug, and Polynesians use it as a ceremonial entheogen within their ritualistic use.
Amazing.
In more modern times, there are a couple of anecdotal stories of people that have been intoxicated in various ways.
Yep.
One was from a 40-year-old gentleman who felt nauseated 2 hours after eating baked Sarpa salpa on the French Riviera on holiday. He had blurred vision, muscle weakness, and vomiting for 36 hours.
Wow.
He then decided to cancel his holiday to drive home, but was tormented by giant arthropods all over his car screaming at him. Arthropods are like insectoid animals, crustaceans like crabs, lobsters, spiders, millipedes. So he drove to the hospital instead, where he recovered completely in 36 hours.
Amazing.
And similarly, a 90-year-old man experienced hallucinations of screaming humans and squawking birds after processing and eating one of these fish as well. He had nightmares for 2 nights, and then it subsided.
Yeah.
So there's still so much we don't know about it, whether it's toxins in the food chain or it's a hallucination brought on by a psychoactive.
And
it's also dependent on the person who's eating it.
Yeah. And as we've said before, we encourage people to be very, very safe. But I will tell you this, there are no laws anywhere in the world prohibiting you from eating psychoactive fish. So as long as you're being very safe, be careful. I don't want anybody getting hurt out there. But this is a great thing to investigate, to study, to learn about. And we're just sort of at the beginning stages, despite this being such an old practice. I mean, when we post this on YouTube or wherever you can make comments, if you've heard of this before, comment and tell us, because it's such an obscure subject that requires so much more study. Now, you got anything on that one?
No, that's all. It sounds like time to move on to dry land again.
So if you've heard of this next one, I'll be really amazed. The next two, these are probably the 2 most obscure animal-based psychoactives I've ever heard of. And I'm just going to read from our good friend Snoo, who we rely on all the time. This is in the back of his book under Other Fauna. And it says, surprisingly, giraffes have been reputed to be psychoactive! Excuse my pronunciation, the Hummer Bagada of southwestern Kordofan in Sudan prepare a drink they call noyok from the liver and bone marrow of giraffe, which their main reason for consuming it is this psychoactive effect. Their main reason for hunting it. They say it makes them drunk, and hallucinations apparently occur both in waking state and in sleep after drinking it. And it is said that a person, once he has drunk this intoxicant, noyok, will return to the giraffe again and again. And that's from Rudgley in 1998. And Snoo postulates that perhaps accumulation of alkaloids from the giraffe's acacia diet plays a role. So they are consuming, I believe, the liver and the bone marrow of giraffe to use as a psychoactive. And it sounds like quite a potent psychoactive if you can perceive it in waking state. There's plenty of things that you can perceive, like, oh, I had dreams, as I said earlier. But if you're perceiving it in your waking state, it must be pretty strong. So yeah, just an amazing, interesting animal-based psychoactive there.
And it sounds like it's not totally uncorrelated with the hallucinogenic fish, because they were actually documented to contain some of the highest levels of toxins and chemicals within their livers and heads.
Yep.
Particularly the organs and livers. So, and in fugu liver as well.
Yep.
And they're consciously processing the liver of giraffe as well as the bones. It's I guess it's a request for further study to see what's going on in there. It's the chemical processing center of the animal, and we all know that acacia do contain some pretty wild psychoactive chemicals as well.
Yep. So the next one, another extremely obscure one. We only have about a couple sentences. I had found a reference to this in another source that I can no longer find. I'll just read the quote from Mr. Snoo. The Aztecs knew of a bird they called Oconinitel, and they said eating the flesh of which caused ones to see visions. This bird is unidentified and little is known of bird toxicology. And the other reference, and I remember I saw it, but it was something about this being a psychoactive duck that perhaps consumed datura seeds, or don't quote me on that, but some sort of plant that caused it to build up compounds in its body, and then you could actually eat this bird and have a psychoactive experience. Yeah,
and we could speculate as to what caused the psychoactivity of the meat. But we could also, with a relatively high level of confidence, know what plant species were and are in those areas. We know there's some pretty powerful psychoactives. There's common things, algae that we've talked about, that could contain certain chemicals and toxins in them. And we know that things bioaccumulate in animals and in flesh and in organs. So there could be some truth to it. We just don't know the full story.
And one thing that really gives it a lot of credibility is that the Aztec knew a lot of extremely powerful psychoactives. They had peyote, mushrooms, morning glory. So if they said it was psychoactive, it was psychoactive. It wasn't like, oh, maybe I feel something. It was like, it's an extremely, extremely powerful compound. There's other obscure bird, a couple that are anecdotal, but yeah, maybe we'll move on to the insects.
Oh yeah. So let's jump into mad honey, shall we?
Yeah.
We'll jump over to the Himalaya, the Black Sea region of, I guess, Western Asia. And the mad honey, as it's called, is produced by the Himalayan cliff bee Apis dorsata laboriosa, which is the largest bee in the world. I think it's twice the size or larger as compared to our European honeybees. It's quite a large bee. I think they're quite dark, and they live up on these cliffs where they make these bee hives that often just dangle their honeycomb from the cliffs under overhangs and things. And they are psychoactive due to the pollen from the rhododendron plants in the area that the bees have been collecting to produce this honey, particularly Rhododendron luteum and Rhododendron ponticum, which are indigenous to the area. Mm-hmm. But the flowers also contain grey anotoxin, which causes hallucinations. So it seems like the bees are super accumulating the pollen, processing honey for us, and then we climb cliffs with really huge, dodgy ladders and pull down chunks of honeycomb for the community, which is still done to this day. But we can jump back in time to some of the earliest documentation of the Greeks who moved through the area and encountered this psychoactive. So Xenophon of Athens, a student of Socrates, described a company of Greek soldiers in 401 BC passing through Turkey. After eating honey stolen from beehives along the route, they vomited, had diarrhea, became disoriented, and could no longer stand, but were fine the next day.
Wow, that's... Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. And in 69 BC, Pompey the Great's army fell victim to a honey trap in the same region. Local forces placed honey along the marching route and then massacred the intoxicated troops after that. So biological warfare was used.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I have it written down as 67 BC. Who knows? Yeah. But I will say real quick, there's a great documentary on YouTube. I think it's just called Mad Honey or Crazy Honey or something like that. But yeah, I've heard of it from like Turkey. You can even buy it online. And it sounds rather toxic if you eat too much of it.
Yeah, but it doesn't sound like a completely pleasurable experience.
No.
But it is currently sold for $60 to $80 a pound on the black market of some Asian countries for its aphrodisiac and energy boosting effects. So the dose makes the poison, I imagine. Maybe a little bit's good. Maybe a lot causes muscle paralysis and nausea and all kinds of uncomfortable things.
Doesn't look fun. In the documentary on YouTube, one of their guides is just getting into it and eating it, and he becomes so sick they have to carry him out. So definitely be careful with it. And that leads us into, so bees can collect in honey various compounds like tropane compounds from belladonna or different plants that most beekeepers, would say it's poisoned the honey, it's destroyed the honey. So that's something beekeepers need to watch out for, that their honeys can be poisoned. But in certain parts of the world, these honeys the bees have bioaccumulated certain compounds, certain toxins or psychoactives, whatever, are used in a medicinal way or a psychoactive way.
Yep. And further to that, there's a lot more we can cover in the insect realm of the ethnozoo pharmacology.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead. Sorry.
So, do you have anything further to add to the bees, the use of bees around the world?
Well, some people use like bee stings for arthritis, things like that. But yeah, I think we have a couple more. I think we have the Brazilian wandering spider, the harvester ants, and there was one more. Oh, scorpion venom.
Yep. So keeping it with in the world of arthropods and insects, we could jump into harvester ants.
Yep.
Which is a really strange story. I think I'll explain this one. Scott's got a bit more information about another insect used in this area from this First Nations group as well, which I don't know anything about. It's going to be pretty interesting. The harvester ant, Pogonomyrmex genus or family, I think it's the genus, is in South and Central California. And it is used as an entheogen by First Nations groups in the area. The ants were eaten alive and in really large quantities. So they cause hallucinatory visions, have curative and preventative medicinal effects. And it's a strong tradition among Shoshonean groups of the area. So basically, within the cosmovision of those groups, it seems that dream helpers are sought out within these states of trance or within these ceremonial experiences or states that they can induce. And the possession of a dream helper is, I guess, it occurs inside the body of someone who consumes large quantities of these ants in order to connect with spiritual guides from the supernatural realm. So it's seen as a very, very beneficial, enlightening connection with the divine of these First Nations groups. It says it gives you power to injure or cure people or to escape peril. You always have these powers if you take the ants successfully. To become hechicero, or a shaman of the area, you take ants every summer until they tell you that you've had enough. If you don't fulfill your promise to follow through with this, then you will die.
Wow.
So you go all in. If you're going to be a shaman, you're going to learn about these entheogens.
And I believe they consume the ants. They roll them up in feathers and swallow them, right?
That's right, yeah. So typically an old woman, a menopausal woman, it seems, feeds these ants to you wrapped in eagle feather down, often 50, 60, 70, 80 mouthfuls until you can't take any more. So these are live ants wrapped in downy feathers.
Yep.
As you sit in a slump from the burning and indigestion, she sneaks behind you and jabs you in the ribs to startle you. In this moment, all of the ants bite your stomach at once and immediately you fall as dead. She takes you into the shade and leaves you there for a number of hours while the ants have induced a visionary state involving animals imparting their virtues onto the ant taker. After visions are complete, the taker drinks hot water to regurgitate the ants, of which always come out alive.
Amazing.
Just like 60 feathery balls filled with ants comes out of you to run away. Absolutely wild use of an entheogen there.
Amazing. And I believe these people or similar people in the same region, they also use datura, which contains tropane alkaloids. Datura related to brugmansia and henbane and belladonna. But this apparently was well documented as having been used by certain groups in this area in Central and Southern California. And I believe they also regard the Black Widow as a ally or a powerful spirit that can meet you in dreams. And I don't know if that's through them being bit by the Black Widow or how that works. But amazing.
Wild stuff. And do you have anything further to add on to the Black Widow? Did you find any more on that?
No, that was about it. Just said it was a powerful dream ally, unless you have something.
Well, what about another spider? It's not really a dream ally, but
no, it's not.
Could help you in the bedroom, or most likely to just send you to the hospital.
Yeah, I won't say.
Fantastic for circulation. Yes. A little too fantastic, which is the Brazilian wandering spider.
The erection spider. That's what I was looking for. I wanted a nice way to say it. Yeah, the erection spider.
The erection spider.
Yeah. Go ahead if you want to.
No, that's that all I have on the Brazilian wandering spider is it causes priapism, which basically leads to strong, long-lasting erections.
Which can be dangerous.
Very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
Dangerous erections. Basically, the venom boosts nitric acid, which boosts blood flow. And Phenutria and nigriventa toxin and phonotoxin, which are neurotoxic peptides that basically accumulate in the body and potentially in the brain as well, and causes this overflow of blood to that particular area.
Yeah. Priapism, is a potentially dangerous and powerful erection in men. And this spider, which is probably the most deadly spider on Earth, it probably kills more people per year. Spiders don't kill many people, despite what some people may believe. Spiders do not kill very many people. This is the Brazilian wandering spider found in, I believe it's the eastern Amazon or maybe the whole Amazon. And it has a cocktail of compounds in it, which can give you an erection. And if you have an erection for too long, as the commercials say, if you have an erection for more than 4 hours, you need to go to the hospital where they have to remove blood from your penis, which will clot and could potentially cause gangrene, and you could lose your penis. So definitely go to the hospital if you've been bitten by a Brazilian wandering spider.
At least you'll know about it. At least you'll know you got this.
Yeah, it's pretty distinct.
That is disgusting.
It sounds very scary. Very scary. People in Pakistan, or a couple people, it seems to be something that has been done on an individual basis.
Yeah.
Will smoke scorpion venom. And it seems to make you very sick for like 4 to 6 hours, and you feel really great afterwards. Not much more is known about it other than that. However, drugs used to treat cancer and AIDS, as noted earlier, have been derived from scorpion venom. So, that's
it's another common theme. You know, venoms are potent cocktails of chemicals sometimes, or very potent neurotoxins or hemotoxins, all kinds of things, most likely designed to kill small mammals or insects or birds, from spiders, snakes, scorpions. And over evolutionary history, they've actually put together these chemicals, and we're just discovering our uses for them, whether they're recreational, ceremonial, or medicinal. It depends how much you take and what the chemical is and whether you understand it properly.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. You know, designed by evolution to interact with our nervous system, our bodies in a certain way, mammal bodies in a certain way. So, yeah, we have a couple more that I'll run through real quick, but I think we're probably nearing the end of the podcast.
Just one more on the scorpion venom.
Please.
Basically, it did come to Pakistan after the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, and Pakistanis had their drug supply of opium cut off, basically. So there is a relationship between opium addicts and scorpion smokers.
Wow.
Where their drug supply got cut off, they would go out into the desert, capture their own scorpions, extract the venom, smoke it. And it's said to cause a high, but also causes brain damage.
Oh, no.
And it gives relief from the opium addiction, or it's a substitute, but it's not a very healthy substitute at all. And we're going to touch on a different venom that may or may not have slightly more beneficial effects on opium addicts, which is cobra venom.
Yep.
Which is absolutely ridiculous. So do you have anything more to add on that one, on the scorpion venom, before you move on from that?
No, I think that's it. I'm happy to hear about the cobra venom.
Yeah, so it's called, scientifically, cobra is Naja.
Yep.
Species name. And in India, a small number of drug users who are addicted to alcohol and opioids, very, very small, this is like 6 individuals that have been scientifically documented,
wow,
are now also addicted to cobra venom. As they say, it relieves them of their other drug addictions temporarily. And the way they consume this toxin is they often choose to be bitten on their tongue tip, and shortly after feel happiness, jerky movements, blurry vision, and then sleepiness, to which they sleep for an hour. When they wake up, they experience a heightened arousal and sense of well-being, which according to these addicts was more intense than the high of a dose of alcohol or opioid.
Wow. Amazing.
So the scientists studying this have said that this snake's venom contains neurotoxins that bind onto the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors in the brain, which seems to substitute or mimic opioids. And so these are typically snake charmers in India, and they may or may not have a tolerance to the cobra venom, which is
Right.
why they can even survive this process to begin with. And we're not sure on the details. There's only 6 individuals that do this practice, but maybe it's about the dose. Maybe it's a very, very light dose, and they have a bit of a tolerance. We know humans can biologically put together antibodies to counteract some toxins, some neurotoxins from snakes and things. Maybe there's a process going on there. It's probably not recommended as a I guess, curative to get you off opioids, but it is happening and it is being studied, which is great.
There was that reminds me, there was a man during World War II who I want to say it was based out of Florida in the United States, and I wish I remembered his name, but he would, gosh, is it mithridization, where you inject yourselves with, or you consume small amounts of poison that makes you immune to the poisons? I wish I could remember his name. Should have looked it up before, but I didn't even know we were going to go in this direction. But he had built up resistance to like 10 or 15 or 20 different venoms, mostly from snakes. And he was the man who made antivenoms during World War II for the U.S. military, mostly snakes coming from Southeast Asia. Yep. And he had built up this resistance by injecting small amounts of these venoms every day. And he could actually go to a hospital. If you had been bitten by the snake and you had the same blood type as him, they could put his blood in you and you would get better because he had the antibodies.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think commercially they utilize horses for that.
Yeah.
So horses they'll be given a small amount of various venoms from, say, Australian snakes, and some of the most deadly snakes in the world in terms of their venom potency.
Yep.
Horses being a large animal and a small dose, they can extract some of the blood, almost like a dialysis, to take those antibodies out of the horse, and then from that isolate anti-venin.
Yep.
That's amazing. So that person took that on in World War II, was it? World War One?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. I could Google it real quick, but yeah, I mean that's how antivenoms are produced even today. I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
Looking for his name, but not seeing it just yet. Let's see. We have an article here. An Army veterinarian created a cobra bite vaccine by injecting himself with venom. And this brave man's name is Dr. Herschel Flowers.
Herschel Flowers.
Wait, that doesn't make sense. Because this is, maybe it was later. I might have been confused because this says 1961. Anyway, I think the concept was correct. We can link this article.
Yeah. How about we jump over to the mochi mescaline snail? Well,
I don't know much about it. Do you?
I don't know much either, but it's very compelling. Very interesting. This is a little introductory on yet another gastropod that is said to be psychoactive when the flesh is consumed. This is a giant snail that lives on cactus in Peru. Am I right?
Yep. Right.
Huge snail. How large are they?
I think they're pretty, like it would fill up your hand from what I think. Yeah.
Giant land snail.
Yep.
Kind
or
of.
half a palm. Yeah.
Yeah. And they consume the flesh of the cactus.
Yeah, mostly
year after year, and hyperaccumulate some of the psychoactive molecules in there.
Yep, mostly Trichocereus species, from what I'm aware. And the moche apparently have lots of ceramics of snails, as they do of other important crops, like even food crops, but also of psychoactive compounds, psychoactive plants like the cactus and various things like that.
Amazing stuff.
Amazing, yeah. But there's very little information known about that.
Yeah.
I think in a future episode we'll try to get more info on that.
We'll do some more research when we return to Peru.
And absolutely, we'll go eat some snails. Other than that, we have a couple things on various glands, such as the beaver, which names is castor fiber, which is a kind of a strange name of species and genus, but genus and species, I should say. But apparently the beaver has alkaloids that are similar to those found in Nephia. Nephia is the blue lotus, the sacred lotus. And the civet cat, it's the glands found between the anus and genitals, which sounds like the last thing I would ever want to eat, is taken as a stimulant, aphrodisiac, nervine, and antispasmodic.
Wow.
Musk deer are said, the glands of musk deer are said to improve intelligence in children in China.
Something going on down there in the back end of these animals. And
yeah,
accumulating. That was a large reason why they harvested so many beaver in the fur trade of North America. It was obviously, but it was also the glands for perfumes, I think.
Perfume, yep. They used it as a scent. They use that as a scent as well. And then the last two,
rich, like the old rich white folks in Europe knew that they were paying big dollars for a gland on the butthole of the beaver.
I think they did. I don't know. Maybe it just smelled nice. But that's kind of like ambergris. Ambergris is this so like big, I think it's sperm whales and other large whales. They'll eat like squid and octopus and stuff, and then all that fat and oil and muscle and everything gets processed through this giant animal, and then they poop out this big whale poo, but the fatty lipid portion doesn't dissolve, and that's known as ambergris. Now it's not known to be psychoactive, but it smells good, and they're worth thousands of dollars if you find lipids that a whale pooped out. You could sell it. You could sell it for a bunch of money because people think it smells good.
Wow. I wonder if the beachcombers know that.
Oh yeah. There's even people that
looking for coins, but they should be looking for, what is this? Like a capsule?
Imagine like a solidified fat, solidified lipids, solidified oil.
It just floats along the ocean and then lands on the beach potentially.
So it actually can be out at sea for years because there's other poo components to whale poop that get washed off. And the only part you want is that lipid, which is like concentrated fish or squid or, whatever. And it has a particular smell to it. Some are said to be, like even decades old. They've been floating around the ocean for decades and they wash up.
Right. Keep your eyes out.
That's right. People train dogs to go look for them.
Oh God. Truffle of the sea.
Ambergris. Let's see. As we wrap up, we'll Google highest selling ambergris. $7 a pound. Looks kind of like a rock.
Yeah.
It's whale poop or whale vomit, apparently. How much is 1 pound of ambergris? $10,000 per pound.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Keep my eye out.
And so a group of fishermen netted $1.5 million in Yemen.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a good haul.
That's a good haul. That's a good haul right there. That might have been more than they made in their entire lives.
Yeah.
But yeah, not known to be psychoactive, just smells good, but an animal product, as far as I can tell. And then me and Callum, as far as I'm aware, we've reached the bottom of our notes. The last thing I have is that a young man was knocked cold, unconscious, when he sniffed real hard a skunk that had sprayed. I think the skunk was dead, and he was like unconscious for a couple of hours.
We really are a very curious species, aren't we?
Very curious species, yeah.
Yeah. One more thing. I think this is one of the weirdest, wildest things. And it took I don't condone this use, but I do have, I guess, admiration for the old people who were discovering this, and it's salamander brandy.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Salamander brandy, or the fire salamander. Salamandra, scientific name, is like an aquatic, it's an amphibian, like a lizard, like a gecko kind of thing. And it is found in Eastern Europe, as far as I know. It's basically collected and thrown into an alcoholic brew with fruit to secrete its skin toxins. Basically, it secretes as many toxins as it can to protect itself from the alcohol until it dies, unfortunately. And the toxins are so strange and so potent, they contain deliriants, which cause people who drink this potion, this tonic, to be unable to differentiate hallucinations from reality. They often lose control of their bodies in a schizophrenic state. They often have conversations with non-existent people in the area, and it causes everything around the user to become objects of extreme sexual desire. So a Slovenian author, Ogorev, who introduced the concept into public eye in 1995, in his article, he described how the drink caused him to make love to a beech tree.
Right. I mean, beech trees are sexy.
That is just the most ridiculous combination of, zoo pharmacological chemicals.
So I've heard accounts of it actually, that they would put the salamanders in a basket. So you go out in the creek and you get a bunch of salamanders, put them in a basket, and you just pour the brandy over them, which causes them to, give them a splash. They're angry. They start and then you pour the bottle of brandy over them, you collect it, and they're able to be released. But yeah, it sounds like a really quite dangerous thing to be ingesting.
And very inhumane as well.
Yeah.
From that approach to it.
Yeah.
But the salamander skin glands produce samandarine, which is a main steroidal alkaloid secreted by the fire salamander. So it's an extremely powerful steroidal alkaloid that causes all kinds of weird stuff in humans. And then you combine it with alcohol and fruit and a bunch of Slovenian people.
And it's Friday night in Slovenia.
And it's middle of the winter and you're bored.
Amazing.
Weird stuff, but that is ethnozoo pharmacology.
Cognosy.
Yeah.
I think this has been our longest episode.
Yep.
And probably the most interesting one. Callum, we have been, just for me and you and for everybody else, we have been talking near 5 hours now.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great.
It's going to be 3 hours.
Yeah, it'll be a long podcast. So if you made it this long, thanks for tuning in.
And we covered 20 topics. So it really is a subject that's worth delving into and breaking apart and discovering for yourself. It's just strange, contentious, semi-undiscovered yet still.
Yep, obscure.
But links to our ancient roots as well.
Yep.
With a high level of importance for a lot of people.
And, as we always say, we could easily break down various aspects of this podcast and make a whole nother thing out of it. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed it, subscribe to our channel, donate on Patreon if you feel it. But yeah, thanks, man. This is really fascinating for me. I learned a lot, and yeah, I really enjoyed it.
It's been a cool, crazy, fun journey. Just this topic alone. So looking forward to doing more. Me too.
So yeah, we'll see you guys next time, and you can look at our website, www.ethnoco.com. That's EthnoCO.com. And our motto is helping people help plants help people, or helping animals help people help plants help other animals, or whatever. I've been drinking some
within the overall realm of ethnoecology, which is based humans' interaction with the environment, and its environment's interaction with humans as well. So we're going to cover all kinds of wild topics on this podcast. So a whole series will be out very, very soon.
Yep. And next time you have a glass of salamander brandy, think of us.
That's right.
All right. See you guys.
Tree. See you.
That's right. Watch out for them beech trees.